Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Create and Consume, a podcast about what we make, watch, and buy in the era of digital content. I'm your host, Austen Tosone, and if you're watching on YouTube, you may see that I'm not in my apartment today. If you're a loyal watcher and listener, you know that I usually record at home, but today, for episode number 12, we are actually in the Empire State Building, if you can believe it. I am in the Covergirl content studio, and I am so excited and grateful to be here. CoverGirl has this amazing studio space that they let creators use from time to time, and they actually specifically invited me in and asked if I'd like to record an episode of Create and Consume here. So I could not be more excited and grateful. Got this beautiful pink backdrop here, but of course, I brought the mic, I brought my laptop, and I brought an exciting topic to discuss with you all today. So since we are here in the CoverGirl headquarters, I thought it would be a great chance to do another beauty episode. Today, we're talking all about the top makeup application tips and hacks that I've learned over the years as a beauty content creator and former magazine editor. But before we get into today's topic, let's talk about what we're creating and consuming. And please let me know what you all are creating and consuming, either by leaving a comment on YouTube, if that's where you're watching, or if you're listening, you can head over to our Instagram and TikTok. It's just at Create and Consume Pod, and leave a comment to tell me what you guys are creating and consuming lately. As far as what I'm creating, I actually have a reference from last week, and I wanted to make sure I included it in today's episode because it's also beauty related. And that is that I finally published a blog post with my step-by-step loose curls hair tutorial. Now, if you know me, you know that the loose curl is my favorite hairstyle. It's pretty much a go-to of mine at this point, and I learned how to do it over the years. I had early access to YouTube videos in 2008-ish, I think, when I got my first curling iron, and it took a long time to really master this hairstyle for me, but we are here now, and it is pretty much, like I said, my go-to. If you happen to follow me on any social media platform, I'm sure you've seen me with it before. I have a variation of it now here as I'm recording this podcast episode. And I really wanted to make sure this blog post was super helpful and specific. So there are step-by-step photos of literally 1 through 12 steps that I do to get my loose curls. So I will leave a link to it in the show notes, or the YouTube description box if that's where you're watching, if you'd like to check it out after this episode. I'm really happy with how that one turned out. And then as far as what I'm consuming this week, I have a new YouTuber obsession, and she's also a fellow Hoboken girl. So her name is Amanda Pulitano. I think I'm saying that right. Fellow Italian girl, if I'm guessing correctly. And she and I met at an event that Amika threw earlier this spring. And I've just been loving her YouTube content ever since, but specifically, I've been watching her moving vlogs. I have really been enjoying her moving vlogs. She's shown a nice mix of like the home organizing component, the struggles of moving, and she's mixing in her usual lifestyle content in between too. So shout out to Amanda. I will link her channel down below in case you're in need of a new favorite YouTuber. Okay, now that we've checked off create and consume for the week, let's talk about today's topic. And I really did want to do this episode because these are little makeup application tips and tricks that have helped me basically feel more comfortable and confident doing my makeup over the years. Pretty much everything I learned about makeup growing up was from magazines. And then once we, really started to dive into the world of beauty YouTubers and makeup content creators, I just kept learning and absorbing as much information as I could. I love seeing what works for different people. I also love seeing people try crazy out there trends from time to time too. If anyone's seen people use like blush as foundation and then put foundation over it, some of that stuff is obviously fun to watch. But today I want to focus on a handful of tips, and I'm going to go in order of application, like from base all the way to the finished product, to share these little tips or changes that have really made a difference in how I apply my makeup over the years, and that I think are very beginner friendly or helpful for anyone who is just looking to level up their makeup routine, make their makeup look better, and make their makeup last longer. I just found an eyelash and now I dropped it. So there goes that. But my wish already came true. Like, we're literally in the Empire State Building at the CoverGirl content studio. I did say that, right? Okay, good. So let's start out with one of the top things that has helped my makeup lay better on my face and last longer. I'm talking about dermaplaning, which is just a fancy word for shaving your face. And I was a skeptic about this for a long time, mostly because I am known to be a little clumsy, as my nephew would say about me. I am maybe not the most fully coordinated person, but as it turns out, I can be trusted with a very small face razor as long as I'm being super careful. So I use the Versed dermaplaning tool. I brought a couple of props today, guys. Nothing major, but maybe this is your cue to check out the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. So I have here in my hand my Versed dermaplaner. It is not scary whatsoever. I promise. It comes with these disposable blades that you can switch out if the blade gets dull at any point. And basically, what I do is I keep this far away from my nose, I keep this far away from my eyes. But I do usually dermaplane just along the sides of my face, above my lip, and especially like kind of around my chin. This helps get such a smooth base for then anything that I put on top of it to just lay smoother and lay nicer. So this has become honestly kind of a game changer for me. I do feel like this one is pretty user friendly and easy to work with, especially if you're new or scared of anything happening. But really, my biggest tip is to just go slow, hold your skin taut, and pull down in really small, quick strokes. Like that to me has always worked. I've never actually like cut myself or injured myself in any way, which I'm grateful for. But yeah, I really do feel like it makes a difference. When I dermaplane, I usually make sure that I'm not wearing makeup that day. I'll try to do it like at the end of the day, especially if I just got out of the shower. I feel like that's the ideal time to do it because then your skin is already going to be kind of moist. Wow, sorry, I just made a bad word even worse. But it will be moist and hydrated. That's what I was trying to do a cadence of two words and it turned into one really horrible version of an already horrible word. But that way you are just having a bit more of like a supple base versus if you wake up first thing in the morning, don't put any product on your face and try to do this. I just think that makes it go smoother. I wouldn't recommend dermaplaning and then immediately putting makeup on right afterwards. I would definitely try to do it like the night before to give your skin a little bit of time to recover. The next thing I want to talk about is skin prep. And when I think back on like my early days of experimenting with makeup and, actually probably buying like the Covergirl foundation from the drugstore and just like slathering it on my face, why was I doing that? I feel like now I cannot even fathom putting foundation on without something else as a base layer underneath it. And I think primer doesn't necessarily need to be a primer proper. Like it doesn't necessarily have to say primer on the bottle, but I do feel like having a base layer of any kind is so important before you apply a foundation. Now, I have a couple of suggestions depending on what you want your makeup finish to look like. So I would say that as a general rule, I think that the last step of your skincare routine in the morning should always be sunscreen slash SPF of some kind. One of my favorite bases to apply before foundation in the summer months is the Supergoop Glow Screen. I love this because it has a little bit of a tint to it, but more than anything, it has a beautiful glow. And I'm checking off the SPF box, so it makes me feel good to know that that is the base layer of whatever I put on top of it. However, if you like a more matte finish for your makeup, I recently also got the Supergoop Matte Sunscreen, and that one has actually really impressed me. It has this like oil control kind of property to it that will give your skin a little bit less of that dewy, glowy look and a lot more of that matte, kind of more, I don't know, professional glam look, if you know what I mean. So to me, even the texture and the finish of your primer can really set the tone for the makeup that you put on top of it, because that primer will, be able to smooth down into your skin, settle into your skin so that anything you put on top of it will settle more into the primer than it will into your skin itself. If you're not sure which primer would be best, I would just recommend picking your favorite lightweight moisturizer and starting from there. After I have dermaplaned the night before and then I've applied my preferred primer for whatever makeup look I'm going for, then it's time to apply whatever my base product is. Now, I want to talk a little bit less about exactly what the base product is, but more about the application of it. And this to me is one of the biggest game changing lessons that I have learned in terms of applying my makeup, which is that in addition to choosing a primer that, can either go a little bit more matte or a little bit more dewy, you can also kind of control how a product will look on your skin depending on which tool you're using to apply it. So I'm back with my props on YouTube. So in my left hand, I am holding a Real Techniques beauty sponge. I love these. I usually just buy a 4-pack of them at Target and, just make sure that I clean them and then rotate through them so that I'm not getting any germ buildup. And in my right hand, I have a foundation brush. This is the It Cosmetics Heavenly Luxe Complexion Perfection number 7 brush. So this is actually a double-sided brush. So the top is a bit more of a thick traditional foundation brush, and on the bottom there is a concealer brush. So this is actually a really good one to travel with, so you don't have to bring multiple brushes. You can just bring this one if you want. But basically what I have learned over the years is that when I distribute or like blend in a base product with my brush, it almost always has that more matte finished look to it. It always looks a little bit more glam, a little bit more in control. And when I use the sponge, I feel like it always has a bit more of that dewier, bouncier look to it. And my beauty sponge is always damp, by the way. I actually like to run it under water and then fully squeeze it out so that it is damp. It's still actually damp from when I did my makeup earlier this morning, and I haven't touched it since. So I think that just shows, how much water I put into this and then squeeze out of it to really get this incredibly bouncy, like fun application process. I tend to have more fun with the sponge, obviously. And sometimes I do a combination of these. Sometimes, if I am applying more of a full coverage foundation, like if I'm getting ready for a wedding or something, I will probably apply it with the brush so that I can be more precise with where I'm putting product, make sure that I'm distributing it evenly. But then I will kind of just soften it a little with the beauty sponge. I really feel like this almost does have that, it's not airbrushed, but it's just blurring it out a little bit more. It has kind of that effect to it, and I think it just looks a lot more natural when I blend in or finish off blending with the sponge compared to the brush. So if you have been team brush forever and you've never tried the sponge, or vice versa, maybe this is your sign to try the one that you haven't tried yet and just see if you like the finish of that better. And if you were using a dry beauty sponge, you heard it here first. Damp beauty sponges, okay? That is the move. Trust me. Trust me. You won't go back. Okay, next up, I want to talk about cream face products. And we kind of already talked about foundation. So if you have a foundation stick, what I just said about the sponge and the brush can apply to that as well. Now I want to talk more about bronzers and blushes because over the years, like when I first started wearing makeup, I was not aware of cream products at all. I didn't know that cream products existed for either of those categories. So I was only ever buying the powder products. Again, this was all like from the drugstore, like from the local Rite Aid in the town that I grew up in. And in the past few years, especially, I really have fallen in love with cream bronzers and blushes. I just feel like for me, as someone with normal to dry skin, a little bit more on the dry side, the cream products just work so nicely on my skin, and the texture of them is inherently adding a little bit of an extra, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, it's going to be more hydrating. I won't say moist or whatever I said before. That was terrible. But it's going to be a bit more hydrating and less drying than if I just applied a powder straight up. If you have more oily skin, though, you might love and prefer powders. They might like sit nicer and they might absorb a little bit of the excess oil too. That's not to say that if you have dry skin, you can't use powder products. In fact, I want to talk about finishing powder, setting powder more towards the end of this episode, so stay tuned for my thoughts on that. But here are some of my thoughts on application when it comes to bronzer and blush stick product specifically. First of all, I think where you actually place these products on your face has a lot to do with how they end up looking. I feel like in the past, I used to place my bronzer way too low on my face, whereas now I kind of try to put it either right in the hollow of my cheek or a little bit above that for kind of a more lifted look. I try to think of it as, you put bronzer where there would inherently be a shadow, and then you put blush or highlighter where there would inherently be light reflecting on your face, which you can actually see very well with the studio lights here right now. So you can see kind of on my cheekbones where light is reflecting, and then you can see even along my nose and then within the hollows of my cheek where the shadows are actually a bit more prominent. So nailing the placement is the first thing, and I know this is actually the hardest thing to do. You can also, if you're having a little bit of trouble with the stick, if you feel more in control with a brush, you can always use a brush to pick up product from the stick and then apply it onto your face. I actually think that tends to look nicer, and then you don't really have as much of the harsh line that you can have if you don't blend out from drawing a straight stick line on your face. But I don't really do that, mostly just because I'm usually in a rush. That's really the big thing about it. But once I actually apply the stick product to like my cheek area or this kind of part of my face here, that is really where then I take the brush and just try to blend thoroughly as much as possible. If I can still see a straight line, that always bothers me. So I really do try to blend it out to make it look as natural and like the way that I want it to as I possibly can. If you find that when you apply stick products, you are still seeing lines, you can also always dot the product on. I'm a little bit more likely to do a line with my bronzer just because now I feel like I actually understand the placement of where I like my bronzer and where I want it to go. But when I'm applying a cream blush stick, like my usual go-to is the Wander Beauty On the Glow Duo that has a blush on one side and a highlighter on the other. That I'm pretty much always applying with two dots kind of on the apples of my cheeks. And then I try to blend upward and kind of like a C curve to, again, kind of have that lifted look and bring the makeup up a little bit higher on my face. And to bring powders back into the conversation for a second, because I didn't forget about them, one thing that I've absolutely been loving doing lately is to actually layer my products. And what I do is a cream product first to really nail the placement and get the product where I want it. And then I'll layer a powder product on top of it. And I just love the finish of it. I feel like the powder sits on top of the cream so nicely. I would not probably recommend doing powder and then trying to put cream on top of that. I think the thickness and the order of that application isn't going to look the way that you would want it to. But I really do like the idea of first applying a cream product and then applying the powder on top of it. I actually also did that today. So I applied the Wander Beauty blush first, and then I used the new Rare Beauty. Oh, why am I forgetting the exact name of it? It's the Rare Beauty Soft Pinch Luminous Powder Blush, and I wear the shade Cheer. That one is really shimmery, and I will also say if you ever notice that blush or bronzer is adding a little bit too much texture to your face, if you like it to look a little bit more smooth and finished, I would probably recommend avoiding products that have a little bit of a shimmer baked into them because I feel like that just kind of enhances texture. At least it does for me personally. But if you don't mind that, if you are into the natural look of skin and you don't mind a little bit of texture, I think that those shimmery products can also be so beautiful. And I just am obsessed with the blush right now. So you heard it here first. I'm in my layering blush era. Okay, so we've already discussed primer and kind of prepping your skin before you apply a base product. And you can also do this for your eyes. I remember the day I discovered eye primer was a fascinating day for me personally. The first eyeshadow primer that I ever remember using was the Urban Decay primer. It came in the little purple tube. It was so cute, and basically you would use the little doe foot applicator and cover your eyelid with the primer, and I would usually use my ring finger to tap and blend the primer in, and that honestly helped so much with creasing and how I applied eyeshadow over the years. My eyeshadow has been on since about 8:30 this morning. It's 3:30 now, and I'm looking at it on camera and in the big mirror here in the Covergirl studio, and I can tell you that there is no creasing to be seen on the eyelids. Now, my current favorite eye primer is the Milk Makeup Hydro Grip Eye Primer, and the reason that I like this is because you can not only use it for underneath eyeshadow, but you can also use it for your eyes for the concealer underneath. And this is really helpful if you notice that you have concealer that tends to crease throughout the day or that's just not really sitting right underneath your eyes. I would like to caveat this right now by just saying if you're watching on YouTube, for this eye, for my left eye, I actually have the smallest, tiniest little cut right here underneath my eye. I accidentally tugged way too hard with a makeup wipe when I was removing makeup the other day, and it is actually very painful. So if you're noticing creasing under my eye right now and you're like, does this primer work? Like, what is she talking about? I'm just kind of having that situation right now, but it's looking pretty good over on the right side of my face. And what I really like about this product, again, like I said, is it's multi-purpose. And I've also just found that with Milk Makeup, all of their Hydro Grip products, they really are there to just help the makeup stay basically super glued to your face. So if you haven't checked those out yet, that eye primer and also the face primer are two of my all-time favorites from them. I believe they both won beauty awards in 2023. If you are a Keep Calm and Chiffon Beauty Awards blog reader, I will link the beauty awards post from last year in the show notes. And speaking of eyes and eye primer, I feel like eyeshadow is possibly the most intimidating makeup product that is out there. And when I think back to like when I was really getting into makeup and watching YouTube, the cut creases, the intense colors, like all of the crazy designs people could do, no wonder it seems so intimidating. So I personally have really pared back and simplified my eye makeup routine over the years. The last time I did kind of a crazy eyeshadow or used fun colors was really for the Eras tour, because I was trying to do more like a lavender/purple eye to go with my Speak Now inspired outfit. But in general, I like to keep my eyeshadow pretty simple now, and I have a couple of like specific tips for this. Number one, if you ever purchase an eyeshadow, like a single cream or powder eyeshadow, or an eyeshadow that comes in a palette and there is a brush included with it, that's probably not like the best brush to be using, especially if it is, just a little kind of mini sponge applicator. At the end of the day, there are better brushes out there that are not too expensive that can really make a difference when you're applying like eyeshadows. So my first suggestion would be if you have a palette that included the brush and you've been trying to use that brush to no avail, is to find a brush that you actually really like and that seems to work well for whatever type of eye look you want to create. And I actually remembered to bring my favorite brush with me here. So this is the Sigma E40 Tapered Blending Brush. If you're watching on YouTube, it is a small but very fluffy brush. And this to me is what I use for like 99% of the eyeshadow looks I create, because what I love about this brush is it really helps blend. I feel like that was always my issue with eyeshadow growing up, was I would put it on, especially like I said with those little foam applicators, and I would like streak the color on and stare at it and be like, why do I look like I have a black eye? So I don't have that problem anymore because I've upgraded my tools, and I don't even think this one is expensive. I think it's under $20. What I like about this is it's just so easy to use. It really blends out the product. It's really helpful if you do see creasing to address that, like when you first apply a product. And right now I am actually wearing the CoverGirl Clean Eye Color Eyeshadow Stick in the shade Ballerina Blush, which has been my literal obsession. If you've watched any episode of the podcast, I'm pretty sure I've been wearing it in every single episode because it is just the easiest, most amazing go-to beauty product, in my opinion. So even when I apply the eyeshadow stick, I will either blend it with my ring finger. And the reason I say ring finger when I'm talking about eyes is because the eyes have the most sensitive skin on our face because it is so thin, as exhibited by I accidentally gave myself a small cut because I was tugging too hard under my eye, which is very upsetting. But your ring finger also has the lightest touch of all of your fingers. So that's why I would just use this to kind of blend out the cream when I apply it to my eye if I didn't have the brush. But when I do use the brush, another tip that's really helped me over the years is that I've learned to basically alternate how I'm blending the product out. So what I'll do is, and I'm demonstrating on YouTube, it's like QVC over here, guys, very exciting. I will alternate between windshield wiper like this. So just imagine the car windshield if you're listening, and then these small little circular buffs, basically, almost like you're washing a car. There's a lot of car references in this. So you want to alternate between kind of buffing out the product and windshield wiping to blend it. Hopefully that makes sense. But those couple of tips have truly helped my eyeshadow look so much better over the years. Starting out with, like I said, the primer to make sure that the products really stay and to limit creasing, and then also thinking about how you place the product and then what type of brush you're using to blend out the product too. Okay, the next tip that I have applies for both eyebrow gel and mascara. So today I am wearing another one of my all-time favorite brow products. This is actually the Covergirl Brow Enhancer Gel Wax, and it is untinted. This is the Clean Fresh Brow packaging. And the best thing that I have learned in terms of, like I said, applying both eyebrow gel and or mascara is really to make sure before you apply that you wipe off the excess product on the edge of the bottle, like I'm doing right now if you're watching, and making sure that you get as much of that excess product off. And this might be kind of obvious for mascara, but if you're wondering, why would you do this for clear brow gel? I have one word for you: flakes. I personally have tried a ton of clear brow gels over the years, and as someone with dark eyebrows, my number one issue was always I love the look of a clear brow gel. It makes them look very laminated, it makes them look very fluffy and nice the way that I like them, but sometimes they would flake. And ever since I took the time to just start wiping the product off of the brush, like the excess product on it, I really haven't run into that issue, which has been obviously life-changing and extremely helpful. Might as well just give my brows a little fluff while I'm here. I love how this one looks, and it's also very affordable. And like I said, I also do that with mascara as well. I especially find that the mascaras that I use that tend to have very thick wands are harder to do this with, because if the brush is very thick, the product can obviously get stuck in all of the little crevices between the bristles of that brush. So specifically something like the Milk Makeup Kush mascara, which is one that I'm obsessed with. I do love it, but it does take me a little bit of time to make sure that the excess product is scraped off of the brush versus something like the Benefit Roller Lash mascara. That is such a thin brush that I really don't have too much issue with product buildup to begin with. And then when I do take the excess off of it, like just by scraping it at the edge of the tube, it really doesn't take very long for me to do. So if you're running into flakes with your mascara, you might also want to try a lengthening mascara compared to a volumizing mascara, because like I said, the brush will be more like the Benefit Roller Lash one compared to something that's going to add more volume, could also mean more product and more potential for flakage. Okay, so now we've gone through our base products and our eye products, and now we want to talk about how to make makeup last better throughout the day. And one thing that has been a total game changer for me is not just using setting powder, but using setting powder the right way. So this is a makeup technique that I learned from Katie Jane Hughes, who I will link her in the show notes. You should all go follow her. She is a New York City based makeup artist and beauty content creator, but really primarily a makeup artist. And she shares so many tips and tricks on her channel. She also shares tutorials. She even has her own brand now, which I think is amazing. And when she explained this technique to me, it literally changed my life. So as I mentioned earlier, I have dry skin, and because of that, I used to just skip powder at the end of my makeup routine. I just really didn't think anything of it. I was like, I don't need powder. I'm already, a little on the dry side. I don't want it to look cakey or anything like that. And what I learned from KJH was I simply needed to switch the brush I was using for powders, which has totally changed the game. I originally, when I first started using powder, would use like a giant powder brush and apply it all over my face, which, as you can imagine, got kind of cakey kind of quickly. But what I learned from Katie is to use a smaller brush. So I believe what I'm actually holding in my hand is the e.l.f. blush brush. Yes, which it is. But this is actually my powder brush. And the reason I switched to a smaller brush is because I wanted more control over where to actually place the powder in just the spots that I needed it and not to cake down my entire face with setting powder. So, ever since I learned this tip from Katie, I just use this underneath my eyes to set concealer. I use it around my chin area, again, to set concealer, because if I have any breakouts, they're almost always around my chin, and then also around my forehead for any lines that product might settle into. Because, I'm always staring at my laptop like this, like getting frown lines, which is fine. That sounds like a problem for me to deal with later on. And this has been extremely helpful and game changing because this just means that I'm able to place powder in the places where I want to prevent that shininess. And it doesn't mean that I am dimming or dulling any parts that I want to be really dewy and luminous. We love that for me. And Katie Jane Hughes is a must follow if you want to learn more about makeup application tips. And I would also love to shout out my friend Jaleesa Jaikaran. She is also a makeup artist based here in New York City. She's also a friend of mine and fellow beauty content creator. And she always shares really wonderful tips for how to apply makeup, what to look for in products, color matching, and all of that good stuff. So again, I will link both of them in the show notes. Please go support them, give them a follow, and check them out. Okay, so we've made it to the end of the face, and I always like to finish off my makeup with a setting spray. And one of the best setting spray hacks that I've also learned throughout the years is that if you want your makeup to last all day, you can actually apply setting spray as you go to kind of help lock in each layer before you add on more to your face. For example, if I am doing my own makeup for a wedding and I want that makeup to last for 10 or 12 hours at least, I will usually do setting spray right after I apply my base products, so foundation, bronzer, and blush. I will do another spritz after I apply my eye products like my eyeshadow and eyeliner. And then I will do one final spritz once everything is done. So once powder is there, once my lips are done, all of that stuff, I will do one more final spritz. So by adding a bit of setting spray as you go, you're actually helping lock in that layer of makeup, just like you would if you were painting a piece of furniture and you did your first coat of paint and your second coat of paint. It's just a way to help ensure that things stay put and last longer. And my final makeup application tip that I will leave you with before we wrap this episode is basically, when in doubt, start with a small amount of whatever product you want to apply, and you can always add more to it later. I think this has not only saved me so much product over the years because I am using what I actually need to use and not just what I am eyeballing and taking a guess will be enough product for me, but it also means that I can start small and always build things up or add more to it as I go. So if I'm testing out a new base product, I might only need a little bit of it. And if it turns out I need a second layer, I can go back and add a little bit more. Especially with things like bronzer and blush, I kind of like to start slow and then I can build on or layer up my products like I talked about before, with starting with a cream product potentially and maybe adding on powder on top to really enhance that look if I'm looking for a bit more of an intense look, if I'm going to be, I don't know, doing a photo shoot or, like I said, attending a wedding, something like that. And I really think this just helps me feel like I'm making less mistakes as I go, because even as I share all of these tips, I still have days where my eyeliner pencil goes somewhere out of my control and now I have a weird line on my face, or where I apply too much or too little of a product. I am still learning just like you all, and I'm not perfect, but I did just want to come on and share some of the tips that have helped me feel more confident in my capabilities as a beauty content creator and just as a person who loves beauty and likes wearing makeup a couple of times a week. So that wraps up today's episode, you guys. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you again so much to Covergirl for having me in today to record this episode. It makes me feel really legit and gives me a lot of inspiration and future goals for the podcast to work towards. It's been really fun living the studio recording experience for a day. And like I said, I'm super appreciative. And thank you again to all of you who have listened so far and supported me. As a reminder, you can support Create and Consume for free by doing any of the following. You can leave us Apple and Spotify ratings and reviews. Please rate us 5 stars and leave a review. Tell me about your favorite episode or something that you've liked. That helps us out so much. Us, me, literally me sitting here editing the episodes and doing everything. I really appreciate it. You can also like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell if you're watching here on YouTube, especially today because I brought props, which is always fun. You can follow along at Create and Consume Pod on Instagram and TikTok. You can send this episode to a friend who might enjoy it. And don't forget to check out createandconsumepodcast.com for episode recaps and more. Thanks again for listening, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.